Welcome back to Triple Uppercut, Triple
That's
KO. Welcome back to TripleKO. It is Triple KO, right?
Triple Tatsus.
I thought it was 3-ko.
3-ko. There was something about a pit at some point. I think we've started.
I think we have we have a big T in an octagon, and then it has 3 at the bottom, and it looks like notifications.
Oh, that like logo sounds so familiar.
Our logo is so much better than the Street Fighter 6.
Oh god! So we've already begun. So everybody, welcome back to TripleKO. My name is Max McButtkiss, and I'm joined by Matt McMuscles and also Justin Wong.
Muscles McMatthew.
Yes, we are. We all enjoy fighting games to a variety of degrees and in a variety of different ways. And potentially, we just got one of the biggest weeks of fighting games in quite a while in terms of the big boys. Right? It's been a little while. SNK has been technically the biggest boy of all of the big fighting game devs over the last like year and a half, maybe even 2 years that have actually put something out. And you would think that Guilty Gear is a big boy, and Guilty Gear's getting there. Like I feel like Arc System Works now has made Guilty Gear slightly more mainstream than it ever has been, which is great. But there's always been this looming thing in the background. So like, what's Namco doing? What's Capcom doing? When is KOF eventually going to make it out? Like when are these like big game franchises that we've all been wondering where the heck they are? Well, one officially came out, pretty damn good. We talked about it last week with KOF 15, and go play it. And we just got an official announcement of Street Fighter 6, and I'm going to ask a question related, but technically unrelated. So Matt, how convinced were you that was Street Fighter 6 and not a reverse relaunch?
I was like 99% sure like I was 98% sure it was going to be Street Fighter 6. And I was 99% sure whatever the announcement was going to be at the end of that Sunday, that fateful Sunday, that it was going to be fighting game related. Yeah. Just it synced up too much with the finale of the Capcom Pro Tour that Daigo decided to delay as long as possible. That was Justin. What?
Oh my god!
I didn't catch your reaction, Justin. But what were you like, dude? Just lose.
So I feel like I was. I wanted the announcement so bad, because Capcom decided to make this website with no minutes. So all you see is 1 hour.
It was generalized.
Yeah, so it could have been 1 hour 30 minutes, 1 hour 40 minutes. So I'm watching the finals, and I'm like, man, please just Daigo, just get watched by Kawano. Even the chat, all the Daigo fans. The Daigo fans have turned into people that's like, Daigo, we want you to lose for the greater good for this announcement.
I noticed the irony of this situation when we were there, and I'm like, we're watching the highest level of Street Fighter V play in history at the moment, potentially in the last like giant event of the game, and everybody wants it to be over and Daigo to lose so we can just see what the hell the future is.
What a timeline.
It's so selfish, but it's like if he was on our side, he'd be like, no, man, just take that L. Just take that L. Just move on. I thought that was hilarious. But like the other thing you mentioned, that it was a generalized countdown. It wasn't to the minute. It was like to the hour, which meant is like, oh, they have no idea when the tournament's going to end. So they can't do it per minute. So it has to be that. So I felt really bad for the people that are like, Mega Man. I'm like, sorry.
There was like a moment in there where it was like arguing it's going to be the return of Dino Crisis. It's going to be in Mega Man X9. It's going to be like all this kind of stuff. And then as soon as it didn't immediately pop up on like the second to minute of the reveal, and I'm like, oh, they generalized it because they don't know when the tournament's directly going to end, and the announcement's at the end of the tournament. It's 100% Street Fighter something. So all the magic of what it could be, all the Resident Evil fans recoiled in damage animation. They're like, oh, no RE4 remake. Oh god,
no more.
Their status bar now says like danger.
Stun.
Like their heart rate stun.
Got knocked back.
I made a really quick tweet saying like, hey, it's most likely going to be Street Fighter 6. We talked about this a little bit on the podcast last time, but I was like, I still think like we could take a bigger break. I know Capcom needs to Capcom and they need to get product out there till they get that. But I still was really hoping for Capcom versus Capcom All-Stars, whatever.
Oh, yeah.
That was my personal, let's spend a year or two with that. And then you'll have like this really polished, full-fledged Street Fighter 6 game that,
Sure.
But I don't know, maybe Max, you have a bit more insight into this, but it's like, I don't know how Capcom's internal teams are set up. I know who they collaborate with. I know they've worked with like Dimps and blah, blah, blah. I don't know how their fighting game division is set up anymore, where they have an internal team, or they have a small team and they mostly delegate things to other smaller companies.
So
do you have, like,
according to, because a lot has changed over the past couple of years, especially, and technically the last time we actually heard about internal development of Street Fighter 6 was from a source that had internal information saying that it wasn't going well, like 2+ years ago, and that the game was initially supposed to come out way sooner, like even potentially close to a PS5 launch game. But it just wasn't hitting the marks. The director on the game changed. Apparently, the person making a lot of the decision making was Ono. And he was moved off the project and then later left the company, and a lot of managerial stuff got switched around. So long story short, it wasn't testing well internally, and there was a lot of issues happening. And apparently there had to be a big shift and adjustment made to the game. What that is, we don't know. But that was a long time ago, right? That was like almost 2 years ago now we even heard about that. So those decisions even then probably got made even before that. The internal division itself, if people are like, oh, is this made by Dimps? Is it made by Aiding? Like the guys that have made the beginning of Street Fighter 5, if not 4, and Marvel 3, like the last big devs, even Street Fighter Cross Tekken. No, this is most likely, we're in a much different Capcom situation here. This is most likely an entire internally developed team, just like Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite. MVCI was made by Capcom with outsourced elements, because for people that don't understand what that means, every game freelances artists and other companies to do things, right? Not like every single aspect of every game has to be made under the same tent. Games are just too big now. So, especially over the past 10 years, you have to outsource artists. You have to outsource a lot of different parts to get your games made. And that's most likely what's happening with Street Fighter 6, because we just heard on Twitter several people come out and be like, oh, finally, people are going to get to see my work on Street Fighter 6. Like, wow, finally glad that people are going to see this game. It was a long time ago that I worked on it. So it's clearly been in development a long time.
Yeah, because Capcom artists don't need to sit there and make every background character. Like, those are models that they can just outsource to somebody else. But a lot of people are like, well, there's nothing to talk about for Street Fighter 6 because there's just this really small clip and, like, obviously a logo. And I think that's definitely, if there was a bunch of gameplay, here's supers, here's characters, we would not nearly be talking about the logo as much. It certainly still would have been an issue.
The logo takes up a large chunk of time.
It does. But I'm also fascinated to talk about this because I keep going back to Street Fighter 5 and how you mentioned, like, Dimps was on it originally, and they had a completely different vision where it was going to be photorealistic with crazy character designs. Like Bison had all this stuff. What?
That's not even the Dimps one.
I thought that was the Dimps one.
That's the Polygon Studios game.
Sorry. Yes. No, you're right. You're right. It was Polygon. Because, they're working on the CGI intros and animations and stuff.
Tekken Street Fighter game. Yeah, Tekken Virtual Fighter looking game.
So that tested apparently poorly or something. It was decided, no, we can't do this. And that's why very quickly we have to reboot Street Fighter 5. We have to start over. But it's like, we don't have a lot of time. Let's take a lot of stuff from Street Fighter 4. Let's put some filters. Let's make the characters look more like oily with these weird rendering techniques, and let's just kind of do that again. There's not a lot of time, and that's why that game at launch had like nothing going on.
Yeah, and I even heard from other Capcom. I think this was around 2014, even before Street Fighter 5 was announced. That the common referral of that game amongst, like, even Capcom USA employees who had played it and knew of it was that it was Jank Fighter. Like, the people knew of that game and had played it, and everyone said it was like super whack.
it was a pretty similar situation with like Street Fighter 4. Because much, I was told about, Seth Killian had to make a major decision about that, and pretty much he's the reason why Street Fighter 4 turned out so well, because he just said this game, the original version, sucked.
We owe Seth Killian a lot for actually Marvel 3, Tatsunoko versus Capcom, and Street Fighter 4. In fact, he put his neck out and risked the severing of the head probably several times with Capcom Japan, and did everything he could to get those games in some right decisions.
It wasn't a lot of that Street Fighter 4 stuff, how like when the people were playing the super jank early version, like EGM was invited over to Capcom Japan play. Like one of the adjustments Seth made, maybe you can correct me on this, was that like everyone had 3D hitboxes like on their actual character models, and then it was like, no, this feels completely wrong, and it was Seth or somebody that said, no, it has to be 2D hitboxes.
Seth was the one that said that. He that's the old description he had like 12 something years ago, where he described the game as being crunchy, where it's like some fighting games just like don't come together feeling wise, like the hit stun, the recoil animations, like all this stuff just feels off. And that's the one he was describing. Funny enough, the EGM one, I remember that article where I remember like, I forget even the name of the show they had. There was actually a video show back in like 2007, 2008. And they went and played in Japan, and they had their impressions of the game. I believe the game still had 3D hitboxes at the time, but that's not even the super jank Street Fighter 4, because screenshots came out of the massive jank early Street Fighter 4. Like they're set in like an airplane hangar, and the art style is fucking awful, and everything looks
I want
bad.
that so bad. Give me that game.
Like, do you remember those screenshots?
Yeah, I do.
It is brutally bad looking. And funny enough, they did eventually release the screenshots before Street Fighter 5 came out, like around that time frame. And you got to see like, oh, this was way worse. Oh my God.
I still miss the original Street Fighter 5 gameplay with Gamer B and Daigo, where they were playing a jank version on like on a Taiwan game show where Chun-Li's throwing 50 fireballs. I wanted that version. That one looked really fun.
I want Omega Mode. Give me an Omega Mode game, please.
That pretty much was that practically, right?
Yeah, it was.
It was practically the launch of Street Fighter 5 was practically Omega Mode Street Fighter. Like characters can just do those crazy wacky stuff. And then within not even like 6 months before E3 happens, like all the mechanics change. Like almost everything, like the V trigger system is implemented into the game. Meter works differently. There's no revenge gauge anymore. Like all that stuff is completely different in the first reveal to the E3 that we eventually play it.
Yeah, people lost a lot of sleep for trying to revamp like a whole new system, brand new. And even when Street Fighter 4 Omega Mode came out, there was so much similarities between Street Fighter 4 Omega Mode and also the beginning of Street Fighter 5. Yes. But I thought that was pretty cool too.
Yeah, I actually recently had a moment to go back and watch some old beta footage, which is still on the channel, and like to look back in 2016, 2015 even, what the betas were like for the game and how we were playing it at the time. And it's a very different game. Like I'm watching Cammy do light into medium, which is a big thing that they take out of a lot of Street Fighter 5 unless it's a counter hit. Like they specifically tried to get rid of a lot of Street Fighter 4 isms, like the way that people played those games. Like light attacks were super powerful in Street Fighter 4. So
because it's like there's already that perception that, wow, this looks like Street Fighter 4, like obviously a little bit better. So it's like, well, we can't make it play exactly either. Like we have to change something to get people excited, because we didn't have enough time to do like a massive visual overhaul. So we have to at least do something about the gameplay. So it's really
go ahead.
Sorry, I was gonna say it's really exciting though. Like to me, when I started thinking about the gears started working in my head, like all that Ono stuff, like I heard all that same stuff. I'm sure like a lot of people did that, like it was being tested internally, Street Fighter 6, and everyone was like, no. And if let's say like this reveal of more Street Fighter 6 info is going to happen this summer, like that still makes me think that this is going to be a 2023 game. And that then makes me think they are, even though it seems like it's fast, they are taking their time with this.
Yeah.
Like, you know, I made the thing that like Luke just came out, or, you know, even other characters just came out not too long ago last year. But if they've been making this that long, and it must have been a small crew making the DLC for Street Fighter V that last season, right?
It was. There's a reason why it took so
long.
A lot of people seem to forget that there was like a 9-month period, but there was practically nothing for Street Fighter V.
Yep.
It was just like an entire year of 2020, I think it was. Yeah, or was it 2021? I think it was 2020.
I think it was 20.
Where like Seth and Gil came out, and they were like at the beginning of the year, and it was like, all right, this seems like the end of the game. You know, we're going into the darkness. We'll see you guys in the light, and like maybe next year. And it was like, oh yeah, so this is where Street Fighter 6 is going to happen. The final character of your game mimics all the other characters. 100%. This is like a final.
It's weird and awkward to then be like, well, then here's some other new characters after it.
Exactly.
But
it was weird,
the whole...
and even the internal guys did say that they needed more time with Street Fighter 6, and they chose to release another season of content. So that was like that decision, and that process was that 9-month period where it was like nothing, and then we got like, you know, an August sort of like, hey, Dan's coming back and here's some crazy characters, and then he didn't come out for a while. I think
it was like a big like
it was like
break.
December.
Yeah, he came out like,
it was
like
after
very
Capcom
early 2021 or something like that.
Yep.
So there was a huge gap of time where Street Fighter V just went dark and almost nothing came out except a couple of random, like kind of low effort costumes. And that time they were 100% working on revitalizing and doing a lot of stuff to Street Fighter 6.
And then they wound up delivering like the best season of like fun characters, right? Like I still think I haven't actually gone hands on with like Oro or Rose yet. I played Dan, obviously played Akira.
Yeah.
And I had loads of fun with her. And like, but you know, I'd consume a lot of this because I was kind of done Street Fighter V in general.
Yeah.
Like I had done what I wanted to do. I really appreciated a lot of characters like Lucia. I never thought in 1,000 years that a exclusive Final Fight 3 character would ever show up in anything.
Yeah.
Super Nintendo exclusive, and Cody and Sagat and blah, blah, blah. So I'd consume a lot of these reports of how these characters play through you guys specifically. And I'd be like, wow, they're having lots of fun. Like, out of that season, I want to ask you both, maybe starting with Justin, like, who is the character that you kind of felt was like the standout of that last season, and who was maybe the character that like was like the least interesting?
I'll let you take this, Justin. What do you feel about that?
It's so hard because I would say Dan, Oro, Akira, Rose, they all are such great characters, but if I had to choose, Dan is definitely the one that stands out the most. Because literally he's supposed to be the joke character, right, of Capcom and Street Fighter history, but they made him super fun. And super fun, amazing personality, still keeps his charm, which is like his taunts, but yeah, pretty much makes the game like, in terms of if you want to press some damn buttons, you play Dan. And I think that's the coolest part.
And he has Dan. Like, they gave him like this emergent element. I can't remember if it was described as Galro-like, but he can essentially cancel moves into moves, right?
Yeah,
where he can like, because of his V skill, he could like stop and then turn that into something else. And that's something that no other character could do in Street Fighter V, and also had a execution element to it. Like it's kind of how you have to like smack. You have to like do these things really quick. So you'd have certain Dan players that play different than other Dan players, right? Like not just in terms of, oh, this guy's using V skill 1, this guy's using V skill 2. There were some different people that were using that technique for quite a while. And you get some very aggressive Dans, and you actually get some fairly defensive Dans, which is kind of neat.
And the fact that he has a 1-bar V-trigger, obviously the first time to have a 1-bar V-trigger. And I think the coolest part is that he's actually competitive. He's part of the meta somewhat. You have Daigo picking a Dan player on his team for Street Fighter League. That says something about the character, that Capcom did an amazing job with this character.
He's fun. He's a really fun character.
And wasn't this the time where it's like everyone got this feeling when they started explaining the mechanics of each character that, wow, these characters are now like, they feel like they're out of what they're doing here is more similar to something like Killer Instinct or even like a NetherRealm game where these characters are having distinct mechanics outside their V triggers.
Yes.
And that's what what's making everyone so much more fun. Like, I think all of them, like, I forget what Rose can do, but like everyone
she
has
the cards,
she can put
the tarot
orbs
cards.
out shit, man.
So cool.
Yes. She just starts throwing out her JoJo shit.
Yeah.
Like Lisa
JoJo
just
stands.
You put like the cards, like there's that was the best part, and that's why Street Fighter 5 Season 5 is easily the best element, and most people will agree. Like, core mechanically, like Street Fighter 5 has a fundamental issue, and the craziest part is that everybody got to witness it in the very final round, in the very final moment where Daigo loses in Capcom Cup. You literally see the game sort of like crumble apart around this V system, where Daigo got hit by a jab and he died. He got hit by a jab, canceled into V trigger, led to half bar stun, and then had to make a guess. Guessed wrong, got hit again, got stunned, and he died. So he lost to a jab, and that's like a lot of the stuff that a lot of people complain about Street Fighter 5 is that it snowballs crazy hard if you have like meter. But these characters were just so much different, right? Compared to like the launch, like the first 2 seasons of Street Fighter 5, almost everybody plays the same. Like everybody kind of does some very similar thing outside of being a charge character or not a charge character. And by the end of it, like we're getting into like, you know, G, and you start to get to crazy characters, even like Abigail, who does have some kind of nutty stuff.
That's true.
Even though I don't like the way he looks. Their characters do get way more unique and way more fun. And I think the big hope, even from professional Street Fighter players like Justin and like a lot of other people that are mainstay Street Fighter 5 players, they all mention that the elements that put those characters together in the end is so much more interesting. Even though a lot of the core systems might be kind of like this is frustrating because the game's been out for a long time, but the characters are getting way better. And even characters like Oro, for example, have a lot of like emergent gameplay mechanics with his rocks and stuff like that. Like, it's really cool how they got it's substantially better by the end.
Can I give out about Abigail a bit more? He hasn't been covered enough. He is the only Canadian rep in Street Fighter, and I'll never forgive Capcom until they put another one in. Like, I'm just like, man, that's who we have to represent Canada, huh?
Is there another Canadian Capcom character that hasn't been out yet?
Now, I know there's like these characters you see in endings and stuff, but in Mika's like wrestling league, there is a Canadian like women wrestler named Maple Storm, which is so
Maple Storm. That's a good name.
It's like, please put her in anything. Like, I don't know. And like, I guess technically Sasquatch from Darkstalkers can appear as a guest character. He's from Canada, as bio says.
Street Fighter 6 is gonna feature a new dynamic Canadian Street Fighter named Hockey Puck.
Hockey Puck.
Tim Horton. He enters Street Fighter 6. So
okay, but you also asked the question, Matt, about like who do I think was like
who is
the
like
worst character
the least
out of the 5? To me, you know, it has to be Luke. I didn't really care about Luke because I was thinking about all these different type of collaborations of like what character Capcom could use. Because if you announce Akira as your 4th character, I'm thinking in my head, it has to be another guest character, right? I wanted Dimitri so bad. I was aiming for Dimitri.
You and I talked about that.
You were saying about it was an SNK character. And then we get Luke. No last name, just straight
Complete
Luke.
new kid.
Yeah, looks like from UFC, you know, MMA type of fighter from like you watch when you watch on shows. But I was just super unimpressed. But they made the character super strong, so it makes people play him more. I guess that's their reasoning. But just the character Luke still doesn't really hype me up.
It's so what if all they had to do was swap his release and announcement with Akira. No one would have minded that much.
I would agree. Yep.
Like, it would still be weird if Capcom had said at that time, "Oh, this might be a little hint in the future of Street Fighter 6." That still would have like taken people off guard. Like, oh, but the fact that they made him last one, it's like he was kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation.
And you understand where they're coming from because they obviously knew that our reveal of Street Fighter 6 isn't that far off. So we want to do something that like leads into people thinking that, okay, yeah, the future is right around the corner and this weird looking shithead with braces is the future.
It's also a little, I'm fine with like a new character, like making a Poochie to show up in Street Fighter to be like, hey kids, but the fact that there's so many blonde American punching men already, it's so strange that they decided like this is be the future. Yeah. There's Cody, there's Guile technically, like, you know, he has a full body moveset. It feels
like 60% the roster just has the exact same like facial and hair features.
Yeah, Alex, like there's all these
Alex from Third Strike,
blonde bruisers that there's Ken, like
no, they turned Ken into some Filipino surfer for some reason.
They turn him into more kicks. I'll give them that. But, you know, so in the Street Fighter 6 trailer, you see Luke. We already know he's going to be there. And he does like this with his fist. He pulls him up. You see his fist and his veins get all pumped up. And he's like, yeah, let's fight. I'm like, that's still Ken in my head. I don't understand replacing Ken with Ken.
All right. The real question is, how many people that are not big Street Fighter fans watched that trailer and thought Luke was Kendo?
I thought it was Ken.
People probably did.
I thought it was Ken, like, you know, second 1 or 2. But
as soon as the Popeye arm thing happened, I'm like, oh, it's 100% Luke.
Yeah, because he
just looks way different. He's not blonde anymore. Number one, he looks completely different. He looks honestly way better, in my personal opinion.
He got a haircut. Yep. He got
so
a nice
because
haircut.
Well, then we can lead into that. This Street Fighter 6. Hopefully, but it seems like it is that this is further down the timeline, hopefully past Street Fighter 3. But I still bet you any bets that this is still pre Street Fighter 3.
I think it's still pre Street Fighter 3.
Really, you think so?
I think so. I don't think we're getting to, because Street Fighter 3, Ken and Ryu are like around their 40s. Right, they're much. The timeline has gone forward a whole bunch in that game. I think we're still 100% pre Street Fighter 3. I don't think it's past it.
Because oh man, that's crazy. Yeah.
Gil being included in Street Fighter 5, is that like a dream match element where, like, let's just throw Gil in there?
No,
because he doesn't have anything to do with this. It's true.
He's teased.
It's been a while. He's teased.
Yeah, Colleen's entire presence in the story and everything is that she's like the camaraderie of Gil.
It's just so weird. It's like, why are you so scared to go past that point? It's not like anything. You can say anything happened after the end of Street Fighter 3. Did the world end? Is that why? Is that the end of the timeline?
Yeah.
Does Ryu just quit street fighting? I don't really get it. But I'm siding with Justin here, where it's like, I kind of think hopefully it's more optimism.
I want to agree with you. I want to agree with you. I think I actually do want it to go past Street Fighter 3. Yeah.
He 100%. Actually knows better. He's probably right, but like I want to be right.
Yeah.
So
look. If you look at the trailer and you look at Ryu's sweaty body, it's an old man's body. You know what I mean? It's like a current Brock Lesnar body where, you know, you don't see the full pecs out.
Yeah, he's supposed to definitely look like he's traveled. Ryu's got a ton of scars on him and shit. Like he's
cool.
They're definitely trying to give the element that this is a different Ryu, other than the fact that they're adopting Hot Ryu with a new design. Like I think people are missing the fact that he's completely redesigned. He has like shoes on. He doesn't have his top gi on. He has like a weird like waist sash. Like this is clearly Ryu that has gone through some shit. I think Capcom is just naturally afraid of moving past Street Fighter 3, but I would love to think that yes, this is a future where our characters are actually developing and aging a little bit.
Because that was a big issue in 4, where it's like Sakura is still a schoolgirl, even though it's been like I don't know how many years, but it's like, oh, we just don't want, like, we want the character to look like they used to. Thankfully, in Street Fighter V, it's like, hey, here's a new redesigned costume. Here's a nostalgia costume. Like, almost everyone got one, I think. So that's always...
here's the girl with a job. Yeah. The arcade token girl.
Yeah, Sakura's redesign was great.
She was, and, like, that's what I'm hoping for, that, like, going with Hot Ryu as a default, and let me just say this, the Street Fighter 6 Ryu is way hotter than Street Fighter 5 Hot Ryu, just because, listen, we're going to get into it, I assume, but it's like, we're assuming what we saw in the trailer is what the game will look like, because RE engine.
It was an engine.
And, yeah. And I'm, at first, when I first saw the trailer, I was like, oh, it's just kind of like Street Fighter 5, because in my head, I'm like, this is just a CGI intro, and it's just going to look like Street Fighter 5. They kind of have these bulky proportions. But then when I thought about it, I'm like, no, if the RE Engine can do this very easily. Like, that's kind of what it looks like. Everyone's kind of not shiny in a bad way, but everyone has a realistic sheen to them. And I'm just like, if this winds up looking photorealistic or, you know, close to it, whatever RE Engine can do, I'm like, actually, that is exciting, because you can, in 10 years, point to Street Fighter 6 and go, wow, look at that one. That one stands out. You can't do that with Street Fighter 5. You can do it with 4 as well. But 5 is just going to be like, oh, it's that kind of middle in between awkward one.
It actually has an identity, you know? I think that's the thing that is the best takeaway from 6's reveal, is that a lot of, and I said this before on my stream, but a lot of people are going to be super miffed that Street Fighter isn't cartoony anymore. Because Street Fighter has literally every single game in its series been an element of cartoony, whether it's an anime mix or characters barfing or like stuff like that. It's always had this mixture of very cartoony, very animated kind of like 2D elements. And everyone remembers Street Fighter from being 2D, so the closer to 2D it is, the better. This is the departure. The Street Fighter, obviously from the logo and everything, Street Fighter is changing. We're going for something different. It is not Street Fighter 5. It is not Street Fighter 4. And that's going to perturb a lot of people. But you know what it's going to do? Because
it's going to get new people.
It's going to bring in a lot of new people. Because Street Fighter 5 did not attract a new audience really from Street Fighter 4 because it looked like Street Fighter 4. And it looked like a little bit better version.
Here's a great example of that. I remember going to a bachelor party and we had gotten like a console. We had like rented out like a space that you rent out to like, you know, just party or whatever. I got like I got the PS4 set up, downloaded Street Fighter 5, downloaded Mortal Kombat X, I believe.
Everybody played MKX, I guess.
We started Street Fighter 5 and everyone goes, what is this? I'm like, it's Street Fighter 5. He's like, it looks like all the other Street Fighters.
Yes.
What is that? I like, what do you do? And I'm like, it's like plays like this. And everyone's like, do you have Mortal Kombat? Put on Mortal Kombat. You put on Mortal Kombat. They press both triggers.
Stuff happens.
Crushing blows happen, whatever, the X-ray moves. Everyone's having the time of their life. Everyone's like crying. They're so happy. They're having so much fun. So even, you know, you, me, everyone here, everyone watching this could probably look at Street Fighter 5 and go, oh, that's Street Fighter 5. But like, if you don't follow this game, like it blends in with 4 just a bit too much.
Matt, I can't tell you how many times I've had to tell people, because I get the earful of a wide variety of audiences, right? Not just like the super competitive FGC people that love fighting games, pay attention to this stuff. No, I get the earful and I see the opinions of so many people. And when I went to E3 the first time SF5 was playable, I literally told the lead Street Fighter producer at the time, I'm like, dude, this game looks a lot better than SF5. But the problem to me is that if you stand 10 feet away, it looks just like 4.
Yeah, like side by side.
And that's if you stand 10 feet away, that's the casual perspective. And people are not going to see much of a reason to invest in a game that has like a fourth less of the characters that Street Fighter 4 had. When it's just like, this game's better. Like the previous game's better. I could just play this one. I already have all the characters in this, and has way more stages and way more content, you know? And
a bit of the problem is because 4 and 5 did come out relatively soon in between, where it's like, you know, Tekken looks very similar from like Tekken 5-ish, maybe that's
6-ish.
Tekken 6, Tekken 6 Tag and 7, they look really similar if you put them side by side. But it'd been a long time in between. Like Tekken 6 was 2010 on console.
Tekken Tag was 2012, so it was like 5 years.
So that was another problem where, like, I remember another guy at that party was like, didn't Street Fighter 4 just come out? I'm like, Ultra Street Fighter 4 just came out the other, and you know, it gets into a whole thing. Yeah. So when I was thinking, like, personally, do I want this Street Fighter 6 to look like Tekken 7, realistic characters, shiny, you know, lots of effects, very graphically impressive? And I'm like, it's not Street Fighter, but ultimately, to me, when I started thinking about it, I'm like, it's the right move.
Yes.
Because how do you push that cartoony art style? Like, we're reaching this weird thing where you have that Ratchet and Clank on the PS5. It's a cartoon game and there's nice effects everywhere, but essentially how much different does it look compared to the Ratchet and Clank on PS4? Cartoony art styles are really hard to push when you have all this technology. And even though, like, you're right, Max, people are going to be like, oh, well, this isn't what I remember. This is what I like about Street Fighter. I like it to be cartoony. I like it to be anime. It's like, then play Street Fighter V. I don't know what to tell you. It's it should look like Guilty Gear Strive.
Yeah.
Well, I want Guilty Gear to look like Guilty Gear. I don't want both games looking similar.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, yeah, that's why there's so many, I would say, Capcom collections they're pushing out, right? Before they had the Street Fighter 6 announcement,
let's talk about that.
They pushed out the Capcom Fighting Game Classic collection, and that one shows a lot of different games from back in the day. So for fans that are really into like the cartoony, the old school nostalgia, they can get that, right? And they showed a lot, right? Show a lot of cool games. So obviously maybe there's a part 2 where they add more of the Capcom fighting games, like rival schools possibly. But for the first one, I thought they did a pretty good job with that trailer and showing off what they're going to be giving out.
Yeah,
it was impressive as it went on, and then it was like showing all these quality life improvements. Like it's really similar to the Capcom Beat 'em Up bundle, which I thought was like a really good collection, and it's the same devs. Okay, I was
the same
like
devs
almost
as,
sure, but
I think Beat 'em Up bundle and the one that just came out, which was the Capcom Arcade Stadium.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, it's got all the same accoutrements and menu elements, you know.
And the only thing with the Beat 'em Up bundle is that I was waiting for Beat 'em Up bundle 2 or for there to be some type of DLC. I was hoping once, like, you know, maybe some contracts are up, we can get like AVP or The Punisher or some things like that in there. Maybe Cadillacs and Dinosaurs, although I think that game is like lost in legal limbo, whatever. But I was hoping that, then I didn't get that. They never really did anything with that bundle again. Maybe it didn't perform that well, but I hope that this one does, and I hope that will lead to, like, you know how there's those legacy collections for Mega Man? There was like 2 separate ones for each, like classic Mega Man, like legacy collection 1 and 2. And I'm really hoping if this collection does well, though I don't even know, are there any 2D fighters that were missing on this disc? You know, obviously you can't. Other Street Fighters don't, you know, already have their own collection. But was there any?
Would you count Capcom Fighting Jam?
Yeah. Essentially, the only games that are really missing that have not been big remasters of their classic 2D games, because you can't include any games that were on the Street Fighter Anniversary Collection back in 2018. Yeah. So, and this doesn't, like Street Fighter 2 Grandmaster Challenge or a Hyper Street Fighter 2 Turbo is the one that allows you to like pick any of the grooves of the previous like SF2 version, so you can play like SF2 Ryu versus a Super Street Fighter 2 Ken, and you can actually just choose that instead of doing like menu codes and stuff like that. And that version was not on Anniversary Collection. We just got raw ass Super Turbo mode. So that's actually really cool that there is now an official re-release, because the last time we got a re-release with that was the 15th, right, Justin? 15th anniversary when Third Strike came out, right?
It was the one with Third Strike in it. Yeah. So it was like a 2-for-1.
So it has literally been, Jesus Christ, 20 years since that has happened, and that game has been officially re-released in some way. And everything else, I think, has not been. I think Fighting Jam, and obviously, anything versus related, like, and we're talking anything Marvel versus and anything Capcom versus SNK versus, they're all missing.
Yeah, but I was kind of in my head excluding those because we all know those are the
different story.
Maybe it's a different story. I just realized I did send a terrible text to you, Maxi, on the evening of the reveal of Street Fighter 6, because I thought in my head, oh, I know what Street Fighter games are missing that should be on this collection. Where is my Street Fighter the movie?
Yeah.
Where is my Street Fighter the movie, the Saturn and PlayStation versions? Those are completely different characters. Why is this series not getting the respect it deserves? Does anyone have an answer?
They probably got to pay Jean-Claude Van Damme a lot of money, man.
How does that work? Like the likenesses of all those actors and stuff. Like, there's no way they have that anymore.
Okay, Ming-Na, the Queen, she's currently starring in a Star Wars show.
Mandalorian, yeah.
So, and Jean-Claude Van Damme is still alive. Everyone else... I mean,
just because they exist doesn't mean that, like, we just get to use them.
Ooh,
Kylie Minogue. It might be too expensive now.
It might be too expensive.
Ming-Na's stock went up, okay, after she started.
Take their sprites and mess up their faces then. You don't got to pay them.
Jeez, man, I didn't even put it together that she was Chun-Li. Holy shit. It's been so long since I've seen Street Fighter the movie.
Oh my, I was so close.
If you watch a Boba Fett show, I think she got younger.
Yeah.
Like, she looks amazing. So that's the only thing. If I really wanted to be a shit, I'd be like, you have to complete it. Every single Street Fighter game will be digitally available in some way, or a 2D one.
Yeah.
Okay, can Street Fighter EX even be re-released without Arika's say-so, because it has their characters in it?
I don't know. And I think the split from Arika when they essentially did Fighting EX Layer, which was like early 2000s or something like that.
Yeah.
They split off from Capcom and took a whole bunch of like their own characters with them. So there was like some sort of amicable split where they have their own music. Like, even, for example, Sakura's theme, right, like Precious Heart, is in the latest Fighting Layer game, Fighting Layer EX.
I didn't know that.
So even
I did not
some
know
of the
that,
Street Fighter characters' music is actually present in. So they took like ownership of a lot of that stuff when they split.
Oh,
so I don't
that's
know.
cool.
Like, I don't even know if the EX games could just be re-released without some major negotiations.
Okay.
Because that would be great for another collection.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the other 2D games I was thinking of, did they announce Slam Master on the Capcom?
No.
No,
game collection?
None of the wrestling
But-
games are on there.
but unfortunately, like, people remind me that Tetsuro Hara, who's the illustrator for Fist of the North Star, like, he has a thing with that. It's like how Strider is owned by like that manga company,
Yeah.
or a portion of Strider is. So it's like, I believe Tetsuro Hara gets credit or something for some of those characters, because he designed, like, obviously not like Mike Hagar or whatever, but like a lot of those characters he designed. But it would be really sick, because I've always wanted to play Slam Masters 2, because that's a straight up fighting game.
Oh,
Yeah.
the Ring of Destruction
Ring
one?
of Destruction, like, that's
Yeah.
not even a wrestling game at that point. Like, I think like you don't even pin people.
Yeah, as they have life bars and everything.
Yeah, exactly. And I would love those personally. And also I want the Japanese versions. What is the Japanese name for Saturday Night Slam Masters? Does anyone know without looking it
Muscle
up?
Bomber Duel? Is it Muscle Bomber Duel?
Muscle Bomber, the Body Explosion.
I like
The
it.
body explosion.
The explosion part is where you caught my interest. What?
Yeah. So that collection, it was so smart to start it off with that. And I remember, Max, I was watching your stream of it, and you freak out because they say announcements.
Yeah, immediately I'm like, and yeah,
Yeah,
I
plural.
won't lie. At that point, I'm like, oh shit, is there an MVC collection in here? Like that, and then as the fighting game collection trailer continues, I'm like, are they gonna do it? Are they gonna do it? And then a Street Fighter 2 shows up with a big gap in between the trailer, and I'm like,
Yeah.
what version of SF2 have they not put out? And yeah, I'm like, oh, so Hyper SF2 Turbo. I get it. The saddest part about this is that there's a couple of, and I kind of want to make a video at some point. There's a couple of lost to time versions of Street Fighter games that are just never going to come out on anything. And one of them is Hyper Street Fighter Alpha, which is, I think, limited to the Alpha Anthology or something like that.
Yeah, maybe that rings a
then
bell.
there's-
Oh my god, that's so long.
It is a weird like mix mosh of like alpha games that you can mess around with. And I think there's also technically Street Fighter Alpha 3 Max, which is limited to like PSP. And that'll just
I would
never
love that.
like these are like the ultimate versions of these games with like the most characters, most things you can do. And I don't think if they're I don't know if they're ever going to get an opportunity to re-release them in some way.
If you want to get really granular, like Street Fighter Alpha 2 Gold,
Gold,
and
yeah.
if you want to
Yeah.
get really stupid, you want to go crazy, go wild, Street Fighter Alpha 2 Super Nintendo. Put that on a disc and sell that. Love it. I love it.
So really quickly, have you seen people fix that game?
Yes, because there's all these like memory issues or
Yes.
whatever. They got rid of like the loading pause.
Yes, the
there's all
game
these
is actually
little
fixed. We played it. We played the modified, the very minor modification that somebody made to, it was an audio issue that actually
Yeah.
caused the hiccup at the beginning of the round start that made it like, round one. It would wait 3 seconds. Fight! And, like, it was super goofy. Somebody fixed it. It was an error, but right as they shipped. So it just works. I'm like, this is amazing.
I played the most out of any alpha game is like that version.
That version? Oh, man.
SNES version.
I didn't have a PlayStation, so I was just like, yeah. And when it did that loading pause, I would tell my friends, like, they were like, what the hell is that? I'm like, there's so many graphics that the Super Nintendo is like, loading. It's the best version of the game.
Yeah.
You can tell.
Poor baby's trying so hard.
Yeah, exactly. He's coughing and sputtering. He can't do it.
I think the collection's actually fantastic, right? Of all things, there's like 5 goddamn Darkstalkers games on there technically, which is really damn cool. And it's the fact that Darkstalkers, like that is clearly the big focus of the collection. Like the fact that Darkstalkers, all these versions have never been put into a collection before. Back even when Iron Galaxy did the absolutely fantastic Darkstalkers Resurrection collection back in 2012-ish, or maybe 2013. It was great. The netcode is fantastic, but it was limited to only certain versions of the game. Essentially the popular ones. So just Vampire Savior... I believe was the one that was there. And so characters like Donovan, for example, aren't even in it. And that's the big gimmick of Vampire Savior 2, I think is the official title, is that, yeah, Donovan's in it. And a few other weirdo characters. These are the versions that you can only play on like Japanese Saturn and stuff like that were ever officially released. Because in the US, man, all we technically got was Darkstalkers 3 on PlayStation. And that's essentially a bunk version of Vampire Savior with way less animations and stuff like that. So it's cool that Darkstalkers is actually the big focus of this collection.
So I'm sure in the trailer for this, they showed off that there's going to be like a little like museum section for like unlockables art. Please, one unlockable episode of the Darkstalkers cartoon, just like how Final Fight Double Impact.
Like,
I'll edit it. I'll voice
the whole thing into 5 minutes every episode.
I can do that's easy on the Darkstalkers show. That'd be pretty cool. I was gonna say though, for a potential like round 2 of that, Darkstalkers is the focus of this collection. So it would be great to have a Marvel focused collection if that can ever happen. But here's the thing: while all the fighting games, Children of the Atom, all the way to Marvel vs. Capcom 2, that's all like, you know, those are all givens. It'd be really sick. They don't have to have online play, but if you could, it's like actually throw in everything that you can.
Super Nintendo
since you
games.
have the Marvel, you throw in Mutant Apocalypse, War of the Gems. Thank you. Even though War of the Gems is abjectly terrible.
Yeah, those games aren't specifically great.
Yeah, and throw the Punisher in there just because. Why not? Like, no one can play these otherwise unless they have like an old Super Nintendo hanging around. Yeah, those are available in arcade 1-up like cabs too, older ones. So
they don't not exist. You know, they have been re-released in some fashion over the past 3-4 years. So I feel like if there was like a Marvel and Capcom compendium sort of collection, it would probably be like the 2D focused games, because as we can tell, like what they're allowing, like there's like save states, there's fast forward, there's, you know, fast back. I think there's like a lot of goofy things that they're adding throughout all these games.
Offline rollback netcode.
Yeah, and rollback netcode. Like that's the actual big inclusion in this one, is that all the games, every single game in the collection apparently features online lobbies and rollback netcode, which is insanely cool. But the reason a lot of that is possible is because they are essentially CPS2 games, right?
Yeah.
They're all on like the same old graphics engine, and they're essentially these guys that I think M2 is the one that put these collections together. Somebody might have to correct me if I'm wrong, but it's like a very notorious port house is doing these and has been doing it for Capcom since essentially the Capcom Beat 'em Up collection. So to me, if there is a situation where that ever happens, it would be amazing if they use all the library, right? But it'll probably be all the library up until the end of the 2D era, which is Marvel 1.
Yeah.
And that's really unfortunate because Marvel 2 is on a completely different engine. And the only thing we know about Marvel 2's re-release back in 2009 was that Digital Eclipse used the source code of the Dreamcast, and apparently it was super whack. Like, they actually got source code of the Dreamcast version to put that the last time Marvel 2 was released together. And they like, it was hobbled together, apparently. I talked to a programmer who actually worked on it. It was held together by duct tape and string, but it shockingly worked. And even at the end of it, like, goofy things happened where Gambit's glitch, for some reason, didn't work. And they're like, it's a feature now. We fixed
It's a feat. No, you want that feat. You still want those glitches, but it also makes sense because even if you look at like how I would say, freelance developers making Fightcade and No DC Bear, they have huge success with doing like emulating rollback for the CPS2 games. And obviously currently, they have Marvel 2 on Fightcade now, CVS2 on the Naomi, but these are using Flycast, right? So Flycast is a brand. It's pretty much a different version, different emulation, and it's not even perfect yet, right? There's still input drops. They're still trying to fix it, so it's definitely not easy.
And that's the problem, is that if it was the biggest issue with a lot of Naomi games, and why you don't see a whole bunch of Naomi games on systems, is that the emulation for it on actual consoles is finicky. And apparently a lot of the times I hear developers would prefer source code when it comes to Naomi. So it's a weird situation. That's why like a lot of the Xbox 360 releases of games that clearly could have been, just like emulated ports of Dreamcast games, they're not. They're actually like, they got source code of it, like Crazy Taxi and all that kind of stuff. It's actually like a unique version for 360. It's not emulated. It's running on the original code of the game.
So then that has to be why, well, it could be a reason why there is no Marvel collection like, released today, yesterday, years ago, because they would rightly think, well, we can't also offer Marvel 2 in conjunction with all these other games.
They're not all work.
It's a lot more work because they're not that compatible, because they're on different things, but we can't not have Marvel 2 on that collection. What? That's why there is the Origins.
It's the premium game that you would expect. Yeah.
That's why they had the Origins release was a separate thing from Marvel 2 HD.
Yeah.
Right? Because sometimes I mix it up.
What you're saying is absolutely right. Like it's a completely different job of getting all the classic Marvel games and Marvel vs. Capcom 2. So I wouldn't even be surprised if there was, if MVC2 and the big MVC2 movement was able to do anything. I wouldn't even be surprised if there was a Marvel collection out there somewhere and Marvel 2 wasn't included. I that would make a lot of sense to me, that like MVC2 might get like its own individual release again, which is funny. But to me, in terms of actual development, that's the one that would actually take the most time and effort.
I was going to say, if they have to do that, like have a separate release, like, no, it just makes more sense. It could make for a more stable game, blah, blah, blah. What you would do is, like, let's say you have a Marvel collection before that. You release them, a month, 2 apart. I don't know, whatever.
No, I agree.
You let someone that buys the first collection, you get like Marvel 2 for free if you bought the first collection.
Something like that, or discounted or something.
That. Yeah.
I completely agree with you. I think if there's a future where this stuff happens like that, that's kind of where this conversation is going about the Capcom Fighting Collection, because it's clearly the things, the two things that are now missing and have been brutally missing for so long is MVC games and Capcom vs. SNK games. And those are the ones that arguably everybody wants the most, And there's good news that Capcom and SNK are working together well. And apparently, like, the lead Capcom fighting game dude that we see in the Capcom Directs for Street Fighter V is at the forefront of that. He really values the relationship with SNK. They might be releasing another SVC card game that never got translated to the US in any way at all.
Really?
And they might actually translate it. Like, an article just came out about that. So the best part is that there is definitely a future where Capcom vs. SNK games can come back in some way. It's just that it's not yet, because we're seeing this one right now. And I was just about to mention, this seemed all very familiar to me, because like these games and titles, I'm like, I've talked about this before. And I went and found an older video of mine back from the very first, it's like the very first hints of Street Fighter 6, and there was a big Capcom news update. I'm actually looking up the video because it talks about an article where Capcom re-upped the licenses for a ton of weird fighting games like Cyberbots, like Pocket Fighter, like Warzard, like Power Stone and Vampire Savior. Like there was a moment where they suddenly had all these old fighting game names, even like Dino Crisis and stuff like that. It was like a whole bunch of games that we had not heard anything about for some time. This video is from December 19th, 2019. And this is essentially the precursor to what was just announced. Right.
Yeah, and this filing is different than like just trademark re-upping, which most companies do on the regular. It was something else, right?
It was something a little bit different. And specifically the big ones that were in here were related to what just happened. Cyberbots, Puzzle Fighter, Pocket Fighter, Super Gem Fighter Mini Mix was also in there. Capcom Fighting Jam, and things like that. But long story short, like the majority of games that were just in the collection. So where there's smoke, there's fire, you know? Like this was a long time ago, and a lot of people are like, so when's Marvel 2? This is how long this took, right? This is like from over 2 years ago. We just hearing the inkling of this, and now we just got the announcement. So it takes time for these games to happen.
Those are just Capcom IPs that have no other company involved in it.
That's how long it took. It took over 2 years for you to even get the announcement of these games existing, and it's still not going to come out for like 2.5 years since we heard about this happening.
Right. So yeah, I know that is because some of those leaks that have happened in the last like year or two, the major Capcom leak where it had these weird unreal, like to me in my head, I'm like, how are we hearing about like a possible Final Fight or Power Stone reboot that is slated for 2024?
Yeah.
And at that time I was like, that's like 5 years away when I heard like, that makes no sense. You obviously plan things out in advance, but I was like 5 years for just those? Like that seems crazy. But now it seems way more logical now.
I'll tell you why that stuff happens, and it's the way Capcom's investment relations sort of work. They essentially have to appease a lot of board members, and if they see gaps of time where there's just like nothing, people get freaked out. So they just in some situations, and a lot of those games, like the big ones was like new Final Fight game, new Power Stone game. Those are the two that like stuck out the most. I was like, what? Like, and they were like 6 years away. I was like, what? I don't know.
Because when I see that,
it could do well. I think it could do well just because when you look at Streets of Rage 4, it did so amazing. So I feel like Final Fight is like literally probably like the brother and sister of like Streets and Rage, right? So that's just, so I just think that it could also do well.
It could.
No,
happen,
you're totally right.
But those essentially, I'm calling that a lot of those really future titles that were way out are there just to make board members and investors happy.
Yeah, makes sense.
Like, oh, you're not working on nothing, right? Like, where the heck's our money going to go in 5 years in 2024? You know, like when that leak first happened.
But when you mentioned Power Stone 2, I really do think that Power Stone 2 multiplayer on Steam or PlayStation 4 player kind of like madness would be super amazing.
It would be, but they're such loved series that Capcom has done nothing with, like especially Power Stone. I understand Rival Schools has these weird voice acting and music Japanese licensing issues that might be holding it back. It's what's been holding it back for a long time. But Power Stone is all Capcom, as far as I know. Like there's not any issues like that. And it's an Itsuno game. He's still there, still like, doing well for the company. And like the last release of that was on the fucking PSP. Yeah. And I'm just like, wow.
And that was a collection. Most of the work is done.
Yeah.
Just port that, but just when you see Power Stone reboot or remake or Final Fight reboot remake, the Capcom mobile, I'm like, that's bullshit. That's too good. Like, you know, it should say Resident Evil 9. Like, that's the thing that struck me is like, even if it's like, let's just placate board members, just put Resident Evil 9. They're like, awesome. We like Resident Evil.
Great job.
Yeah, and I think that was even in there. There was some, if we're talking about the old leak, there was some weird thing like Resident Evil World or some like very large scale sounding like surname. I was like, these are just here to let board members know that we're going to make games eventually, you know?
Yeah, okay. We should probably, I saw Justin put out a video and I didn't click on it yet because I knew we were going to talk about this, but I saw Street Fighter 6 wish list. I'm really curious as to what those wishes are for you guys.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, the wish list is obviously everybody's dream come true. For me, I had a very inspiring one while taking a shower. And you get the best ideas in showers, you know what I mean? But I would love to be a pseudo version of like, maybe a hint of like CVS3 where they use groove systems for different ones. So adding maybe a Street Fighter 4 groove, a Street Fighter 5 groove, Third Strike groove, Alpha groove, and stuff like that.
That's
that was my personal wish list, right? And for Street Fighter 6, and I don't think it will happen because it might be too complicated, but that would be an amazing thing to have. Yeah,
that would definitely be interesting if because Capcom Fighting Jam essentially like had a good idea with its groove system, but then limited it to characters in the exact same way that CVS1 had a cool idea with its ratio system, but locked it to characters. It was like Don't do that, man.
Yeah, I don't want no lock. I want everybody to play. If you want to play Luke in a third strike groove, make it happen.
Yeah. That'd be amazing. I mean, I think that's a great idea. I think the groove system offers some of the most depth to Capcom versus SNK2 than most of the 2D fighting games that Capcom has. Like, you can play characters a ton of different ways, It's one of the reasons why I like Mortal Kombat X, even though clearly one is going to be better than the others. That's just the nature of fighting games, right? But it's just having the options available is what's important. Just like knowing that you can play S Groove Ryu and just spam level 1 supers like crazy is kind of neat.
Like, to this day, Mortal Kombat X is like, 3 styles that you pick from, like, is still... Like, I just go back to that. Mortal Kombat 11 has some fun things. It also has some things that I was, like, not a fan of. But, like, the style system of that was just... So, for Street Fighter, like, 6, potentially what... I mean, I don't know if you guys agree, if you've talked about this, is I saw someone mention this on Twitter somewhere, just a random post, and I was like, yeah, I'm ready to go back to that again, which is 3 supers... and you can select or not select. You have all 3 of them, but I'm kind of tired of
not
like
the one super,
not the one level 3, and then the one like normal super. Like, I'm kind of done with, not done, but like I want to see at least an option for another style in how supers are delegated, and that's like just the super system. There's other stuff, but. That was like the main one where I'm like, oh, that would be a nice change.
I like that. I think
a nice change to go back to the past.
Would make sense.
Or you could, like, I don't know, something with the super system in general. I was going to say maybe you can like sacrifice 2 supers for a better super.
You just got close to Pandora something, Matt, and I'm gonna have to disagree with you there.
No,
Pandora, right there.
Sacrificing anything, man.
Give Pandora a chance. Okay, you sacrifice clothing on your character.
Go on.
You get more naked.
Go on.
So no, that's Hot Ryu was a hint. He sacrifices the top, and he gets more power. He gets more bold. He gets more super if he sacrifices clothing because he gets more bold. The bold,
it's kind of interesting.
No?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting that you mentioned about the supers, because I feel like it's been one super since like Street Fighter 4. Street Fighter 4, Cross Tekken, Street Fighter 5. It's all one super, one character. And yeah, that does kind of suck, because I love seeing multiple supers being used with different characters. Like King of Fighters 15, you have 2 supers in the climax, right? That's just nice. You have options for if you want to use a different super or not.
Yeah, and I was going to say, KOF, they give you the option of like technically DHCing, where you can go from like a level 1 to a level 2 or level 3, and then you have more options there.
I was going to say, like, because I've been watching your guys' videos on King of Fighters, just being like, look at all this crazy shit you can do. You can do, like, this into super, then you do another, like, there's all this option, like, to actually have fun and experiment. And, like, even though Street Fighter 5 towards the end, like we've already talked about, made a lot of big strides to do that, supers kind of still say the same. Like, yeah, you can, in 4, you could select between the 2 that you had, the 2, like, level 3s, but it wasn't the same, In
Street Fighter 5, there was a big moment at the final season where there was a lot of debate whether or not they were going to add another super for every character or add, like, another unique mechanic to the game. And long story short, they essentially added invincible backdashing. I forget even V-Shift. I call it V-Shift.
V-Shift, yeah.
And it's a cool looking thing. Like V-Shift is probably one of the better ideas in the game. The problem with it is that it suffers from kind of a Guilty Gear Strive issue, where if you want to do the really cool stuff in the game, it costs meter. And you only get access to so much meter. So you have to make this like big choice. It looks cool, but you're just not going to see it all the time, Was
there any other wish list stuff you had, Justin, or was it just like that was the main one?
I would say besides that would be like the main mechanic. Obviously, characters, it could be endless.
Yeah.
Personally, I love some of the Street Fighter 5 characters that they have introduced. Like, I would love to see Manat come back. I think her design in Street Fighter 5 was tremendous, and seeing Manat in like that engine for Street Fighter 6, I think would be insane.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I still think of like characters, because I really liked what they did with Nash in Street Fighter 5 with his gameplay.
Make him a zombie.
And the way he looks. He's just a cool character. I think characters like Nash would look crazy dope in...
What if Nash became Shadow?
Something like that.
He's pretty much almost dead.
Just push him all the way towards like the darkness type of thing. Yeah.
The dark side.
I think you should take Nash and Blanca and have them fuse and become the same character.
That's a good idea. Yeah, no one's ever done that before. So I think for me, the thing I want from Street Fighter 6 the most is for it to try its ass off, right? And it seems like in some ways Capcom's fighting game division has been kind of aware of this. The end of Street Fighter V, they worked their ass off, and they tried their ass off to make people happy. It felt like the first time in a long time in 2020 when we first got the announcement of like Dan showing up. It's like, whoa, that to me, like I did a Dan Legacy, and I was even contacted by like Capcom friends. They're like, did Max know? Like, and I didn't. I genuinely didn't. But the reason I wanted to do a Dan Legacy is because this is a character that just makes people happy. Right? And he's not like an esports character. He's just a goofball, fun character that doesn't feel like he fits in the world of Street Fighter V, because Street Fighter V is more focused and presentation, and it's like they're about their competitive spirit and the competitive spirit in person too. So I'm like, Dan just doesn't fit. You don't fit like a goofy joke character into this game. It just doesn't make sense. And then it happened, and it was like, what? Like, that's kind of crazy. Why would you do that? Like, this is just for the fans. Why are you making a character just for the fans, right? You want to make a character for the esports side, like, and that feels like that's been the history of Street Fighter V. It's doing characters for like the sake of pushing its esports divisions, and like, and I remember so many people at the beginning of SF5. Why would they put Dan in the game? He's gonna suck. You know, and it's like, aha, you gotcha. They're putting him in because people like Dan. People just like this guy. Like, oh, that's good. This is an insanely good news. And long story short, we all know where that went. Yeah, Street Fighter V Season 5 for the most part is nothing but like fan service. It's nothing but like, we're bringing this character back because he's crazy. Oro's got a turtle. You know, Akira's back. Like, Rose doesn't play anything like she does before practically. Like, all these things were really cool. And it was constantly like a good call after good call after good call, and then the fighting collection happened, and it's like, this is all a really good call. It seems like the decisions that Capcom's fighting games have been making over the past year all seem like good calls. So what I'm hoping for is that the beginning of Street Fighter 6, even though it's not showing much, and we can only really pull so many conclusions after it being different and looking different and having a different logo and going for something much different than what Street Fighter was before, I think that's a really good call, and there's going to be a lot to prove when we see what the game plays like and how cinematic it looks or how visually different it looks. That's going to be the big test. And all I really want, my big hope, is for people to love Capcom fighting games again. As I'm telling you guys, it might seem like Capcom fighting games are doing fine, but Street Fighter V burned a lot of bridges for the casual audience. And everyone is like, you need to prove to me this game is worth spending money on. Because I was ripped off in 2016. That's what they feel like. And
they don't have that. Sense. They don't have that crutch that Street Fighter 4 leaned on, which is like, hey, remember Street Fighter? Remember that like 9-year, 8-year gap between, like, you know, it's a constant now. Like, essentially, it's still a brand that Capcom wants to trot out like every year when they can, content, DLC, whatever. And like, they have to lean on something, and whether that be a drastic art style change or like, you know, it not looking cartoony anymore. When I thought about it, I'm like, I agree with you. Like, it is the right call to do changes like that, because otherwise, like, what's the point, really? You need more players to support this series.
And there was obviously going to be some differences in between, because, like, what does Blanca look like? How are the female characters going to look like? Ryu obviously looks different, because this is a much different visual take on what Ryu is. And yeah, he's a big wide boy. They're clearly still like, even though we're talking RE Engine characters, almost every quick character is going to be on the same quality as like a DMC5 character in some ways. But at least DMC5 is still trying to keep in a world where humans look like humans.
Yeah.
In Street Fighter's world, I feel like, okay, they're humanistic, realistic, but they're also the size of mountain ranges, right? Like, Ryu's chest is a mountain range. So like there's going to be pushes in some directions that I'm concerned about, but could be pretty goddamn cool.
Or Justin, like, Fang exists in this world. No, he's not
coming back.
He better not.
Bro. He's not coming back.
I want to talk a bit about characters for a second. I would like to see, you know, less legacy characters. I know that's like, you know, people are like, what the hell are you talking about? It's like, I think we could go without Guile for a game, maybe. I'm just saying, as an example.
We kind of did with 5.
Yeah. Alpha 3 as well too. The Alpha games as well. Third Strike.
I've never seen Guile at the end of Street
of
Fighter 5 tournaments. I've never seen him there.
Well, I mean, Guile was missing for he was in season 1. He was technically missing for like half a year.
Yeah. But I mean, like, the leaning on of like, remember Street Fighter 2? Here's Dalsim, here's Zangief. There's some characters you obviously need, but to make room for like the roster, let's just say the roster, 30 characters, whatever. And I know we can talk about roster all day, but I would absolutely want to see characters that we haven't seen in a while, because there's still a couple. Sodom, never gone to Street Fighter 5. The only alpha character, that came from that series, like, never showed up in 5. Would love to see him back. Maybe replace Abigail. Maybe Abigail doesn't get another shot. I'm just saying. Remy, if you want someone to appeal to like people that like Guile's gameplay, Personally, I much prefer Remy to Guile now. Despite his Americanness, I have a lot more fun playing as Remy. Things like that. Any characters that have never seen the light of day since. I don't think there's that other many. Like, I suppose you could count Street Fighter 4 characters that came from 3. So like Dudley.
You kind of got to start thinking of the
Makoto.
characters that maybe didn't make it into 4 and didn't make it into 5, or were in 4 but not in 5. So like Makoto and DJ and stuff like that. Like, maybe they have a chance of being in the launch.
Rolento would be good.
That'd be good.
I would replace Zangief with Hagar.
Right?
Replace Zangief with Hagar. That's the one.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We have all these blonde punching boys. I hope just blonde American Street Fighter characters, like almost every single one is. So, that's just a lot, in one go. And because we've seen Ryu's design, and even Luke's design is different, I really, really hope for this sincerely. And I know you can just sell costumes later. I kind of do hope that they tone it down on costumes in general. I went back and I was like, can we do a Cremtina critiques on all the costumes of Street Fighter 5? Max smartly did it in chunks whenever season's completed, but now we're looking at 300 costumes.
6 hours later.
It's a lot.
It's a lot.
Chun-Li alone is $200, I think.
Pretty much. So, I would like everyone's default design to be drastically different. Like, I want to see changes like Charlie in Street Fighter 5, like that type of stuff. Ken in Street Fighter 5 is also a good example. Ryu being this hot Ryu is a good start. I don't want to see Chun-Li in the exact same Chun-Li outfit. As much as I love it, I would like to see a bold default change to Chun-Li. Obviously have blue in there, that type of stuff. So I think that also helps people when they look at Street Fighter 6, when we see gameplay.
Needs to look different.
That looks different. That's not the same Street Fighter 2 Chun-Li, but obviously that's hard to design
in the
characters
same way that
sometimes.
Chun was changed in Alpha, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. It changed like that. I mean, she has a variety of costumes in Street Fighter 5 that if that one of those were her default, that's awesome. She looks great there. So any changes like that to characters, in every single instance, is obviously a good thing. Help bring in new players. Be like, oh, well, this looks, different and new, or, whatever. And that, I definitely think that at launch, it needs some type of big single player mode.
Yeah.
Does it need to be a 6-hour cinematic mode up to the quality of NetherRealm? It doesn't, but it needs to be something. It needs to be.
I completely agree with you that, like, Capcom has already had 2 attempts over the past 7 years, 6 years actually, to do the Mortal Kombat story mode. And both of them fell flat on their face. And in fact, I think did almost nothing for Street Fighter 5. Might have done a little bit for MVCI, because I know at least that story mode is a lot more redeemable, even though still super cringeworthy and very, like, if you're actually a fan of this stuff, is like even worse, arguably, but still is a lot more competent.
You went back for the cringe. You're like, oh, I'm gonna play the story mode again.
I had to be refreshed of it, of like how brutal
what was
it was.
the boss again? It was like Ultron Sigma.
Sigma.
Ultron.
Yeah.
Still a cool boss idea, but
it was cool. Yeah.
Ultron.
two attempts at doing story mode stuff. Don't do it, man. Just please, just do the things that we like Capcom fighting games about. And I think Street Fighter 4 is a good example. Put some hidden bosses in there. Put some like mystery fights. Put like a challenger fight. Sprinkle some story stuff. Like even Street Fighter 4 and Ultra had just like anime intros and anime outros.
Yeah,
and they weren't super high quality, but they were something. Yeah,
that'd be good.
You know,
you can just put like whenever you go through an arcade ladder with a character, have that arcade ladder for that character tailored for that character.
Yes,
they'll meet. You know, it's stuff that Street Fighter 4 like essentially did. They have their rival fight, and they had that. Remember that dialogue the characters would exchange with each other while like you were fighting. And shit.
Yeah,
like you can do things like that. You know, do a little smattering of in-game cutscenes. You want. When you take that character and go through arcade mode, you should feel satisfied. And Street Fighter V, unfortunately, never really did that. No. You can't have one artist, one poor Bengus, have to draw every single ending, it was just too much. I think going just the in-game route for the cutscenes, they don't have to be long. They could be a minute or two. And like, that's the only thing you can do, because like Max said, they had 2 attempts to do big, huge story modes, and they didn't really work out. And in some instances, I saw people saying like, this would be better if they didn't exist, because some people thought like this hurts the game because they're so inferior to other story modes we've seen, and they're just not very well written.
Exactly.
And they're not really well thought out. What? Street Fighter lore is not well thought out. Who would have thunk it?
Yeah, I do completely agree with you that single player content, you would like to think that with a lot of the good calls they've been making, that they're aware that that's the thing that burned all the bridges with Street Fighter V, right? There'd be enough feedback from Capcom USA and Capcom Japan and casual players alike, and lack of sales in the first couple of years of the game, that they realized that, yeah, we just did not hit our casual audience, and it suffered. Like, we suffered really hard. So I would like to think that, yes, we can get, hopefully, a Capcom fighting game that comes out and is actually like full package, has good online, has a variety of online modes, and has things that are just fun to do, and has fun modes. I can't even tell you guys how weird it is that one of the most fun things in Street Fighter's history is dramatic battle and reverse dramatic battle, and it's not back. Like, how in the holy crap can you not co-op with a friend and go beat the shit out of some characters?
Dude, you're forgetting about
online mode.
You're forgetting about Buddy Battle and Ultra Street Fighter 2. Buddy Battle.
Yeah, it was the same thing, right?
Yeah, bring back Buddy Battle. And don't call it Dramatic Battle. That's a terrible name.
The Buddy
Battle.
Buddy Battle. Buddy Battle.
That's right.
Battle of the Buddies.
And guess what? Guess what happened? That goofy-ass version of Ultra Street Fighter 2 on Switch was like a Capcom absolute smash financial hit. They spent no money on it, and it sold like 1 million copies or something.
Wow, that's really surprising.
Why?
It will cost was, what was it cost? $29.99?
Yeah,
I think it was 30, yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
It was a full-price game. It wasn't like a $15 HD remix.
People were so enamored with the motion-controlled way of the Hado mode, they couldn't get enough. Capcom, we want more motion-controlled bullshit in our Street Fighter.
The crazy part was I bought that game. I bought that game for Violent Ken straight up. That was the reason why I bought the game.
He's so cool.
Violent Ken, Evil Ryu, like just seeing like retailored versions of existing sprites and stuff like that. The fact that they had like ST style artwork for them, I'm like, this is really neat, man.
It is. I don't know why the ST artwork that was slightly redrawn, not like HD Remix redrawn, but they just up-resed it and cleaned it up. Like I still play that game because I want to look at that artwork. I'm like, in a car on a plane.
Nostalgic but new. That's the best feeling.
Exactly.
But to piggyback what you were saying, Max, like, do you think, like you were saying, that Capcom needs to get back all its fans and everything? Online netcode is obviously a huge factor that they never really addressed it during Street Fighter V, when people gave feedback on like, hey, can you fix the netcode? Can we have online? And then there was that one person or one group that made really good online for Steam, but then Capcom shut that down. Yeah. So it's just one of those things that, will Street Fighter 6 have good netcode, or can it like rival Guilty Gear Strive's netcode?
Will it be as good as Guilty Gear Strive? Is kind of hard to say, because Guilty Gear Strive had some incredible development behind it that made it possible. Killer Instinct devs and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I think so. I don't think I would be too worried about the netcode for Street Fighter 6. And there's one reason. MVCI exists. MVCI has good netcode. it has good rollback netcode. And it was, from what I understand, talking to the devs in 2017 when MVCI came out, they said it was the same netcode as Street Fighter V, but improved. So they were in a situation where they were able to, at a fundamental level, fix the problems that they were present at the beginning of Street Fighter V. In fact, it's better on PC in MVCI, but the rollback netcode on PC is quite good, like substantially better even than consoles. So I would like to say the netcode itself might not be a problem. Going back into the fundamental issues, Street Fighter V was a budgeted game. The people that put the online into the game were probably not super experienced, and it was a small team from what we understand. And we've understood the reason why Street Fighter V's netcode had issues at the start was because it was designed with a fundamental flaw. It was literally, the rollback in the game was designed not to have any input delay. And you actually need a small amount of input delay for rollback netcode to work. In fact, people seem to hear delay-based netcode, oh god, oh no. But no, rollback netcode needs delay-based netcode to start as a basis, and then the rollback takes over and essentially fixes the issues. You need delay. Street Fighter V had none. It actually had 0. So that was from the very beginning. I remember in 2015 hearing a dev tell me like, yeah, we're going with 0 frame rollback. I'm like, what? I'm like, well, how do you hide the rollback then? I don't know. He just like, that's all I've been told is 0 frame rollback. I'm like, well, what do you do about the rift and all that weird stuff? And long story short, there's like a lot of issues that come as a result of like, if you have 0 frames of delay, rollback netcode. And the funniest thing about that, the dude that fixed it, right? There was an Altimore patch that essentially fixed the netcode. The reason that was taken down is because Street Fighter V is a cross-play game, and you can't apply those fixes to the base PS4 version of the game, much less the PS4 Pro version. You essentially are damaging your player base, and essentially you're splitting your player base up, and it is threatening the online integrity of the game, even if it is better. So it's like, well, why doesn't Capcom just make the patch then? Most likely because consoles like base PS4 just can't do it. In the same way that everyone wants an FOV slider in Call of Duty, they can't do it because the old versions of the game just can't operate that way, you know? So that's I understand like why people are pissed, and it should have gotten fixed, and there should have been something. But the biggest issue with Street Fighter V is that at its core, the netcode was busted because the game had very little budget and it was done fast. And they designed the netcode with improper establishing tools and development resources. They just did it wrong. So it's had issues ever since.
Now will Street Fighter 6 have crossplay then? Because that would be the next.
That's a good question.
I want to jump in on that because I was going to say, why was Street Fighter V on a budget? Oh, because when it was being developed, Capcom were actually not doing as well, not nearly as well as they are now.
Yeah.
In the last 3 or 4 years, Capcom has had their biggest selling games, like their million seller whatever list that they've had for years, like decades. Like it's filled now with Monster Hunter and recent Resident Evils.
Yeah.
Like they have leapfrogged everything. If someone were to tell me, oh, Capcom didn't spend a lot on Street Fighter 6 and Sony needed to help out again, bullshit crap. Like, I'm sorry. I know that budgets get sent to different projects in different departments, but you cannot tell me that Sony or anybody, Microsoft, needs to now pay you exclusively. Like,
definitely
one of the bigger things that I remember reading, especially when I was saying on Twitter that like we've had years and years of Street Fighter V, and some people go, I haven't had years and years of Street Fighter V. I enjoy my Xbox consoles. I was never able to play it. My PC is not great, but I love playing Street Fighter 4, but I couldn't justify getting a system. Like, you know, all the reasons people stick with their brands that they like.
Yeah.
And if it needed to happen, it needed to happen. But if someone were to say Capcom representative or whatever, well, we're sticking with PlayStation. It's like, if you want to keep that player base that Street Fighter 4 maintained, you took a huge chunk of it out because that was the move you made and you made it. But like, I really, like, part of that wish list is like, please put it out on everything because you can do it. Maybe there's technological reasons. I understand the Switch obviously is underpowered, even though the RE engine does support Switch. Ghosts and Goblins Resurrection ran
Monster
on the
Hunter
RE engine.
Rise.
Exactly. So I would really like at the base level to also get Xbox players back there, because that was always a huge chunk of your player base of people potentially be able to do crossplay was just cut out of the equation for Street Fighter.
I completely agree with you that fighting games and exclusivity is like, I'd prefer the game to exist, right? If it means that it has to come out on one platform, that or no game, then of course I'm going to prefer the game. But fighting games already have a problem with accessibility and just getting people to put their foot in the door. So it being limited to certain hardware is naturally a challenge that presents itself right at the start. Like, you're just going to have a more limited player base as a result. Do I think Street Fighter 6 should be on Xbox consoles, PlayStation, and PC? And hell, the reason Mortal Kombat 11 ended up being the best-selling Mortal Kombat game and breaking MKX's record is because there was a Switch version. And we forget that there is Switch MKX, right? I'm sorry, MK11. And that's crazy to think that they went all the way. I don't even know if Aftermath came out on Switch.
I'm pretty sure it did.
I'm pretty sure it did. And that's a big deal. Like that probably accounts for a significant amount of people that invested into that game. Yeah. So would I prefer if Street Fighter 6 came out on everything? Yes. Yeah. Should it crossplay with everything? Ideally, that'd be a best case situation. Is that a lot more work and a lot more effort? Oh yeah. Is it more budget than they'd be willing to put into it? Maybe. But there is a good chance that Street Fighter 6 is the most effort and budget Capcom has put into a fighting game since Street Fighter Cross Tekken. And now that's 10 years ago. And the Cross Tekken got a lot of budget.
Yeah, and even then that was like, a lot of assets and models from Street Fighter 4, but like they can't obviously do that here. But because they have, a lot of this goes back, a lot of Capcom's success actually like recent in the last like 5 years goes to the RE engine. Like it took over for what MT Framework was kind of doing, but just as that was like, getting here or getting there, Capcom USA was not able to use that engine that much for other projects outside, like other games and franchises. But it's like Capcom Japan is just using this engine for everything. I think the new Phoenix Wright is supposed to use RE engine, but it's saving them so much money.
Well, long story short, there's very little reason for Capcom to use anything but RE engine going forward. I think Mega Man 11 a few years ago was made under like a modified MT framework, and obviously Monster Hunter World was, because Monster Hunter World was in development for so many years even before RE engine was a thing, and they had their failing engine with the Deep Down thing that happened. So Monster Hunter was like, we need a big budget Monster Hunter game, we got to do it now, we need an engine, we got to put out a video game, man. And that was when Capcom was at their worst, when they were like, oh shit, we're really our back is pushed to the wall, it's the mid 2010s, everything's doing terribly, we need something to be a hit. And they essentially decided on a big budget Monster Hunter game. So at this point, there is no reason for any of these larger scale Capcom games to not be RE engine. Because if you, depending on the contractual obligations, if you go to Epic and you use Unreal Engine to sell a game, you are sacrificing a large percentage of sales to the licensing fees of using the Unreal Engine. Exactly. So you're gonna have to spend you're gonna lose a whole bunch of money. This is why, like, why do all these big Japanese studios make their own engines? Why do they keep doing that? Like, why do they make an engine and then fail, like Square and and Capcom and stuff like that? Why do they keep doing that? The reason is because those licensing fees will be offset by the cost of making your own damn thing and never having to spend money again and just modifying your own thing for the future. And that's essentially what Capcom has done, and they finally nailed it, right? Finally, since like the mid 2000s, technically, when MT Framework was doing really good and Resident Evil was looking great and Lost Planet and yada yada yada, finally they're on a hit. So RE Engine looks good, and there's almost zero chance that Street Fighter 6 is anything but RE Engine. There's already a lot of tells that what we're looking at in that trailer is in-engine captures and very likely in-game character models. So at least what the characters look like in intros and stuff, The fact that Ryu just looks like Chris Redfield is also pretty telling. It's also creepy.
Yeah, it's also a little...
And the biggest tell is like the foot. The foot is the biggest tell. Why would you need to render Ryu's toenails in engine? You don't need to.
because it has lore associated. Look at all the grime under his toenail. Like, this
you know how many splinters he has walking barefoot? He has to wear sandals now. He's getting too old.
When people are like, "Why does he have sandals?" That's shoes. That's not Ryu at all. I'm like, someone didn't play Street Fighter 1.
Yeah, exactly.
Just fake fans.
I remember when he had like these little cute slippers in Street Fighter 1.
Yeah. Was there any other particular thing, like in terms of a wish list, you wanted to touch on, Max? Or
I've already talked a lot, but I think gameplay stuff. Like I know that I don't want specific mechanics from previous games. I want people that don't make fighting games to work on Street Fighter 6, and that sounds weird.
That's why I saw that.
Yeah, that'd be good. Yeah.
That's why I saw that really surprising thing that made me go, "Oh, wait a minute now."
Yeah.
Is the director of Bayonetta 2 is now working as a game designer on Street Fighter 6, and something that I was kind of able to pick up in the last couple of years is that he was working on Bayonetta 3 as maybe primarily the director, and that game got rebooted, which is why it took so long, and he left Platinum, but no one knew where he left, because usually when this happens in the Japanese game industry, no one says anything about where they're going until they're locked in,
until
their
locked
project.
And already been working.
Exactly. So when this was announced, he's like, "Hey, everyone, this is what I've been doing." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, that's cool." I enjoyed Bayonetta 2 quite a bit. Everyone's like, but he directed Star Fox Zero as well. I'm like, Miyamoto directed Star Fox Zero, essentially, and they just told Platinum what to do. And, that game's a whole other kettle of fish. But when I saw that made me think, like,
it's interesting.
Are they assembling like a dream team perhaps to work on this? I know it's just one guy, but I don't know who else is working on it as of yet. The director of Mega Man 11, someone said, he is working in like a senior position on the game. And I thought that was really interesting too. I got excited when I heard all this news.
And I'm actually excited about it. A lot of people would immediately, to anyone that's like kind of been around fighting games, you would think you would want to get fighting game pedigree or like fighting game players to make your game. That's essentially what Street Fighter V was. Like a lot of SF5, its battle designer was essentially a competitive fighting game player that worked on it. And a lot of the people that went on the influence of creating the systems of that game were essentially fighting game players. So that's why a lot of elements in Street Fighter V, feel like modified changes of Street Fighter 4. In many ways, a lot of like refinement of established things that have worked in fighting games of the past, and just making them feel better, if not be new. But the problem, I think the issue with fighting games is that you need, in the same way somebody described, like when you have a writer that writes like romance novels, sometimes you get stuck so much in doing the same thing, you need outside perspective, and you usually get perspective of like a horror novel writer to like give me some advice here. And it'll change the way you think about things and actually make your romance novel potentially way better. So that's the
horror
same
romance.
That's the same thing with fighting games. Sometimes you need some outside perspectives of like potentially a Bayonetta combat designer that does combat. Clearly, we're doing similar things here, but in a different way that might not be in the same bubble of fighting games. I think the greatest example I can give you is like Guilty Gear. Right? Guilty Gear Strive is a wonderful refinement of all the things that have been in Guilty Gear before, and it just makes them feel better, and it looks cooler, and the RC system is like the same thing, but just better. It's like refinements on established things that have been around, right? But nothing that's like super innovative. Like, are we pushing fighting game mechanics and the genre forward in any crazy way? Have many of the fighting games over the past like 5-6 years really pushed fighting game mechanics forward and like giving you that like, dang, I can do this in this game? Like,
yeah, it's called Pandora.
Yeah, exactly. To me, like the only two games that really stand out over the past like decade of just like, wow, you're allowing us to do what? Like gameplay wise has honestly been like Killer Instinct stuff with like breakers and counter breakers and stuff like that. Like, I could do, whoa, you're what? And that game was being made by fighting game fans, but not devs. Like they had never put together a fighting game before, there was a different take. And then MVCI had Tag Anytime, and that was put together by like, I think a whole bunch of different people at Capcom, not just fighting game devs. I think the director was the dude that worked on like Marvel superheroes. But at least to a gameplay perspective, MVCI had some like you're letting us do what kind of stuff outside of the roster and the visuals, you know? So I think fighting games have been made in a kind of bubble where it's like a sort of refinement of existing things are either like Street Fighter 4-ish or they're like Tekken-ish, you know, in ways that just make minor changes and no big changes. And that's what I hope 6 gets. I hope 6 gets something perspective that's outside of just like what fighting games have been established to be over the past 10 years and do some crazy shit.
Yeah, that is something that would be really fantastic, just because like just reading on Twitter and everything, and you know, going back to like the logo, a lot of like I would say the competitive Street Fighter 5 players, you know, they're saying, oh, the logo's fine because it's more of like an esports look, and obviously they want more of an esports outtake. But you know, I hope the logo does change. I mean, I'm pretty sure you are right about it. It's like it's just a placeholder, and making sure that, you know, in summer, hopefully we don't get another announcement and we actually get some more of a gameplays, characters, a better logo, and just more of a direction and of the actual Street Fighter 6.
I was gonna say really quickly, because you're just mentioning the logo again. A lot of people are like, who cares about the logo? It's just a logo. And it's like, yes, you're not wrong. But at the same time, if you're like, this is what we're going to show on this big anticipated thing, not even people watching the Capcom Pro stream. There's 64,000 just watching a streamer stream that broke his records for all-time people watching his stream. Yep. I'm sorry. Just watching this reveal and like, this is the logo you show up, that means something a bit more, where you're like, okay, well, this is the branding we want to go forward with. It might be a placeholder, but usually in my experience, logos are locked in usually.
I don't think the logo's changing. It's unfortunate. But there's a couple of things on the logo outside of it being a ripoff of like an Adobe clip art that are curious. It splashes on the screen with a bunch of like graffiti style paint.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you've noticed, but at least in Luke's style, there's some pretty heavy like Street Fighter 5 color thing going on, but there's like a heavy like comic book style line art, like really like unique artistic style, and then Ryu has like the paintbrush sort of like classic Japanese Kurosawa look to him. And then the whole thing is complemented by like what sounds like not 50 Cent doing a theme to the game, which apparently is for the game. My big call is that I think this is Street Fighter's return to hip hop.
Please, I'm ready for that, because sometimes
I mean, Luke is hip, yeah.
I mean, just in general, I think they might be going for the hip hop feel that has only ever been done in Third Strike before. They might be trying to hit that again, which I think would be great.
That's a theme. That's a thing you can point at and say
gameplay.
This. Yeah, exactly. It's a presentational thing that can make people go, oh, this is what this game's about. Whereas like Street Fighter 5 struggled with that identity because so many different people were like, oh, let's fix it. Let's do this. Let's do that. Blah, 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 blah.
That was the issue. It had no identity.
The only thing I would say is that I'm fine with a more minimalistic sort of thing. I prefer maximum minimalistic stuff, but like you can do little things to that logo. You can stylize the S and the F a little bit more. You can maybe put orange or yellow tones just to at least harken back to the color scheme you'd see in Street Fighter in general. Just little things. Like I think there's room to adjust it, but I am with Max in that I don't think there's going to be a radical redesign. There's not going to be any Sonic movie, sort of change to this.
Logo.
I mean, essentially it would cost them like not that much to just change a logo, but if you're showing the game and saying the game is going to be like, we're going to see a gameplay showcase or whatever it will be later in the summer, that means, the branding is kind of locked in. It can only change so much. Like things need to get printed and designed like months and months ahead of time. I would like to see it change personally, but like just some adjustments, I'd be fine with. I don't know exactly what, but I'm a stickler for logos and I love fighting game logos.
Yeah,
I had a whole video where I just scrolled through like a million different fighting game logos and just like, this one's awesome and this one not so much. And it does feel like with the trailer, with the colors that Max mentioned and the graffiti thing, that it does feel at odds with what the trailer's kind of hinting at. But again, we'll see in the summer.
Yeah, I got some, once again, I think the last hope that I have is that stylistically the game appeals towards like leans towards the hip hop style. And there's not a lot of hip hop in Street Fighter 3 Third Strike outside of like music and themes.
Yeah.
Right? Even the stages like have this like grungy street feel to it with like even some graffiti in some ways. Like I think the closest thing you can actually get is that Sean throws basketballs at you, right? And you pair the basketballs instead, which is the idea. I think if they just lean in that direction a little bit, it gives Street Fighter a bit more identity, you know? It allows it... Here's one of the reasons why I think they might be doing it, and what sort of solidified my thought process outside of like the not 50 Cent dude doing, you know, I ain't never backing down in the background and like the graffiti art and stuff like that. If you watch the Japanese version of the trailer and you look at Luke, it sounds like the dude by the name, or a dude like the Kyo Kusanagi voice actor is Luke, which is kind of cool, but it isn't lip synced to Japanese. In fact, Luke is specifically lip synced to English, and they do not change it in Japanese. That is the first time in Street Fighter history where there is no Japanese lip sync. So they're focusing technically. I mean, they're doing the Resident Evil way of it, where the characters speak in English, and then they just do every other version is just like dubbed over.
Yeah, like trend. Yeah.
So that makes me think they might be trying to appeal towards like an American audience, which could be where the hip hop theme is coming from.
That could also be just because Luke's an American character and they're just like, you know, it could be like the Tekken thing where every character speaks in the language that they're from and everyone just kind of magically understands everyone with their Babelfish translator or whatever. So it could be. But that is an interesting thought. I didn't look into the Japanese
It's the first
trailer.
time it's ever happened in Street Fighter where the characters don't initially speak in Japanese and they just dub it over.
So yeah, no, that is. I don't like when they say the summer. I assume that means E3-ish time, like early June or whatever. But yeah, it's not that bad. I miss Captivate. Have a big Captivate event in May. Let's go to Hawaii or Miami, please. I would love that. Any I think I would say like we're reaching that time. Any final thoughts on what we saw, what we hope to see in the future? No, okay. I want to see Street Fighter the movie.
It's just hard.
I've talked so much. I'll let Justin go.
Yeah, no, it's just so hard because you don't really get too much, and obviously having the groove system would be cool. But I would say one thing that I'm looking forward to is probably it's going to be new mechanics. I don't see V skill, V triggers coming back, so it has to be a new system. And like from what I know, all Street Fighter games always have a new, different type of battle mechanic or game mechanic. So I'm looking forward to see where they're going to cook up with.
Yeah, I agree with Justin that Street Fighter is a series that is a start from scratch sort of series. Where unless you're like Street Fighter 4 to Super to Ultra to Street Fighter 5 to Arcade to Championship Edition, those are the expansions of the existing material. You know, when there's a new Street Fighter, legacy skill is out the window. Everyone gonna suck. And I think that's I really appreciate
that should be the
tagline. Yeah,
Street Fighter 6. Everyone gonna suck.
Everyone sucks when the new Street Fighter game comes out.
But that's when it's truly that's when fighting games are the most interesting, in my personal opinion. When fighting games are new and those first couple of months where you're just figuring stuff out, especially if the game allows for it, it's the most magical video game experience ever, in my opinion. And I just want to experience that with a Capcom game, and I want to experience it from hopefully Capcom devs that have an outside take on what fighting games could be. And it from some of the behind the scenes that we just talked about with the Bayonetta director being a battle designer on the game, I really hope we get something different and cool.
I hope we get Pandora.
I'm sure you do.
Let's end on that then.
Pandora, just show off Pandora's box and exit. I think Capcom does a great job when they're adding like collaboration characters.
I've never been able to extend this way.
Oh god, I gotta get the helmet on. Oh god. Wait a minute, our guy's a bad guy the whole time.
I just think it's crazy that I'm better at video games now than when I was like 16.
That is how you fix all the problems with all these games.
I feel like toy distribution is so different than it used to be.
They resculpted over the chest. They gave him a flak jacket over it.
I laugh when I see Among Us, but I'm not having fun inside. It's a reflex.
No, you took my joke!